In Part 3 of Lecture 3, we will discuss writing class methods with parameters that are objects. For a method to work, it needs to have some data. That data may be local to the method. In most cases, there is a need for the method to obtain data from somewhere else in the program. That's where parameters come in. But in addition to parameters that are listed there explicitly, there are some data items that it receives implicitly, namely the properties that belong to the object that also owns the method in question. If I write today.writeOutput, it's the same thing as writing system.out.println today.month plus a blank in quotes plus today.day plus a comma and blank in quotes plus today.year. The references to month, day, and year all refer to the properties of the object in question, the one that is doing the calling. In many cases, when you are calling a method belonging to a particular object, you may receive as a parameter an object belonging to the same class. Its properties and methods will have the same names as those owned by the object that owns this instance of the method. So we can use the reserved word this. This is a little like a hidden parameter. It tells us that we are using a property or a method belonging to the object that owns this instance of the method. We don't need to use the word this, but it can clear up a lot of confusion when we do. Let's take a look at an example, namely the writeOutput method. We've seen the one on top before. Public void writeOutput, system.out.println month plus blank in quotes plus day plus comma and blank in quotes plus year. Now let's take a look how we can rewrite this. Public void writeOutput, system.out.println this.month plus blank in quotes plus this.day plus comma and blank in quotes plus this.year. In this particular case, it really doesn't make that much of a difference. There aren't any other objects that are used by this method. But it is an illustration, and it does drive home the point as to who owns these properties. As we get more and more involved in writing classes, it will become clear that there are certain things that you are expected to have in the class. We aren't yet talking about constructors. Those will be one example of it. But right now, let's talk about two things that you will usually see, that you're expected to have there, and that become very important. Every class should have a method called toString and a method called equals. And in some cases, there may be more than one version of these. We will now look at a fourth attempt to write the date class. We will, as we did last time, look only at the code that is in boldface. These are either changes or additions to the class. Our header begins public class date fourth try. And then we have the usual declarations of properties. Month, day, and year. We begin the toString method by writing the comment, converts the date into a string. Now, public string toString, and inside the braces, a return statement, return month plus blank in quotes plus day plus comma blank in quotes plus year. Now, what this will give us and what this will return is a given date in a standard printable format. If we were talking about today, February 13th, 2022, it would print out the word February, after a blank the day 13, after a comma and blank the year 2022. This is something that becomes very useful in a very large number of classes. Equals is the other method that is new to our class. The comment reads, returns true if the parameter and the object are the same data. Returns false otherwise. Public Boolean equals date fourth try other date. So you can see here an instance where this method is using not only the data that belongs to the owning object, but also data belonging to another object of the same type. Let's see how this works. Inside we have return month.equals other date.month, and day equals other date.day, and year equals other date.year. Now, one thing you'll notice at first is that we are using the equals method to compare the 2 months, because the 2 months are being passed as strings. A string, being an example of a class, needs to use its own equals method in this case. The other thing to notice is that I have month, day, and year being compared to other date.month or other date.day or other date.year. This is how we can tell which is the data item belonging to the owning object and which is the data object belonging to the object passed as a parameter. Precedes is a new method. It is not something that a class always will have, but if the data is ordinal in the sense that there's a specific order that you can place things in, having precedes becomes very useful. And clearly this would be the case for a date, because obviously one day comes after another. Precedes begins with the header returns true if the object is an earlier date than the parameter. Returns false otherwise. And our header is public Boolean precedes date fourth try other date. Now inside the braces we have a large return statement. Return year is less than other date.year, or year is equal to other date.year, and get month is less than other date.get month, or year equals other date.year, and month equals other date.month, and day is less than other date.day. It's important to keep in mind the reason why we need 3 of these. Obviously, if the year that is the object owning this is a lower number than the parameter's year, then obviously that one's going to come first. But what if the years are the same? Then let's take a look and see which one it comes from a month that comes before the other. But if the year and the month are the same, then we have to look at the day. There is no way of writing precedes that does not take this into account, unless we're dealing and simply counting off the number of days from some beginning date. Here we see the other methods that we have already written that are obviously part of this class. Set date, month string, read input, get day, get year, get month. Notice that we don't show the code in here, but obviously there is code as we have seen in other cases. This is included here just to remind you that this has to be part of the class as well. Let's take a look now at a driver that we've written that will demonstrate how these 2 new methods, equals and toString, work. We begin with the header, public class equals and toString demo. The header for a method, public static void main. And now let's declare the 2 objects in question. Date fourth try, date 1 equals date fourth try. Date 2 equals new, date fourth try. Now let's set these with values. Date 1.setDate 6/17/1882. Date 2 set date 6/17/1882. If date 1 dot equals date 2, system out println date 1 plus equals in quotes plus date 2. Else system out println date 1 plus does not equal all in quotes plus date 2. We're going to change the first date by writing date 1 set date 7, 28, 1750. And now let's do the if else again. If date 1 dot precedes date 2, system out println date 1 plus comes before, all in quotes, plus date 2. Else, system out println date 2 plus comes before or is equal to, and all of that in quotes, plus date 1. A closed brace for the method and a closed brace for the class. Below we see the output. June 17th, 1882 equals June 17th, 1882. July 28th, 1750 comes before June 17th, 1882. It works exactly as it's supposed to.